Welcome back into the shed, everyone, for another episode of the BikePortland podcast. I'm your host, as always, Jonathan Maas. Here with me in the shed today for this episode is Brandon Mullen. Brandon is running for City Council, Portland City Council, District 3. He grew up in Corvallis, Oregon, graduated from Oregon State University, has a master's degree in leadership and organizational development, and spent 12 years in various roles in public service, including a stint at the City of Portland, and I believe currently works at Metro, but we can talk more about that. So
not currently, but I have twice before.
Okay, so also Metro. So, Well, Brandon, thanks so much for being in the shed and coming out and chatting today.
Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate you.
Is there anything from your background that you want folks to know that I missed?
No, I think that's great. As I say, one more thing. I'm a huge Blazers fan, as people might know. I've been a writer and editor at Blazers Edge for a number of years. And I also host a podcast with a very original name. It's called We Like the Blazers. And so I host
Nice.
that with Connor Bergen, who's a reporter at Blazers Edge. So basketball and the Blazers are a big part of my life, too.
Very cool. I definitely have basketball down here on my list as something to talk about. So we'll get into that. So I said you spent 12 years in public service. You're new to sort of like the political arena. So could you share more about what those 12 years have been? What kind of roles you've had at the various government agencies that you've worked at?
Sure. And I'll just step back even a little bit further than that, if you don't mind. That when I was growing up as a kid, was kind of a angsty, sensitive guy who felt things very strongly and also felt that the way the world worked was often not fair and not just. Graduated high school late, graduated college late. And when I was going to community college at Lynn Benton Community College, I took a political science class, and that's kind of where it clicked for me, that I knew that I wanted to do something about the systems that I felt like were unfair. And the way to do that was to learn them, get in there, and change them. So getting to your question, when I was in college, I worked for Oregon State University's Government Relations Office, and then I worked for a couple of state representatives at the Capitol before working for the governor's office for a number of years. So I did constituent services for a time. I worked for the Regional Solutions Office, which is a super cool office that does like multi-jurisdictional coordination, using the convening power of the governor to bring together. You have projects that cross city, county, regional, tribal, federal, and basically jam everyone in a room and try to get them to work together. So I worked for that office for a while. And then I came to the City of Portland. I worked for the cannabis program and managed that program for a number of years. And then, as you mentioned, I did go to Metro and led their process improvement program. It was an organization-wide process improvement program where we were figuring out how we could get people who are closest to the work and understand that work best, how to make that work faster, easier, smoother for them, and give them more power and autonomy over their work. And that's something that really resonated with me. So I did that. Then my wife and I spent a year in New Zealand. My wife is a doctor, and they desperately need healthcare professionals. So we had the opportunity to spend a year there. Highly recommend, if you haven't been to New Zealand, to visit. It's a super, super cool country. So there I managed a team with a regional government in New Zealand, doing building and regulatory stuff. So a little bit of building permitting, a little bit of land use. Came back to Portland knowing that we would be moving to New Haven. So I actually touched down at Metro again, did some project management there, basically said, hey, we're going to be here for 8 months. Do you want me short term? And they said, yes. Sounds like great. And then most recently, we spent a year in New Haven, Connecticut. My wife was pursuing a sleep medicine fellowship, so I worked for the City of New Haven's urban planning department doing transportation planning and some more project management stuff. And now we are back home. And Jonathan, we are never moving again. I'm super excited to be back home. And then one more twist on my professional resume. During that, you mentioned my master's in leadership and organizational development. I am also certified in executive coaching. So I do some executive coaching, and I also develop and facilitate leadership training and communications training for a firm in New Zealand. When I was working there, I met some folks who did really great work called Kakapo Consulting. And so I work for them and do some like international facilitation stuff and some executive coaching. And so that's kind of the top line of my resume.
Very cool. Okay. Tell me a little bit about your just mobility, how you've gotten around, most of your life. If you did you ever take the bus, as a kid, or do you take the bus now?
Yeah.
I know you do ride your bike a lot around District 3. So just tell me something about how you get around and how that sort of maybe shaped the way you see the world.
Yeah. Like you said, I'm a daily bike rider, my wife and I both. And that does definitely, it has shaped how I view the world. It shapes how I view it now. Like I'm just thinking even on my ride over here, you get these interactions when you're on transit or you're walking or you're on a bike that you just can't get when you're in a car. I had one guy, we're at a light. I was biking a little faster than him. I was like, hey, is it cool if I get in front of you and go at the light? And he's like, oh yeah, like, thank you for asking. How's it going? Yeah, great. Amazing weather. Like, and then a little bit later, there was just someone getting out of their car and I'm just sort of putzing along. So I was doing good on time and just gave one of those like knowing nods and they nod back. And just, I mean, these little brief moments of human connection are so, I don't know, they're meaningful and important and they connect you more to place. So most of my life has been on bike, and I've used a car. We do own one car, in our family, but, I don't have a lot of experience as a bus rider myself. Obviously I do use the bus sometimes, use the Max sometimes. But yeah, most of our transportation is by bike. And we recently, we downsized from 2 cars to 1 car. And we got an electric cargo bike, which was awesome. And, was actually, I told you, I was kind of hoping to take that here and wasn't able to, but, yeah, that's how we get around.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Is there, what parts of D3 do you mostly frequent? Like what's your sort of to and from A and B thing that you're really familiar with?
Yeah. So we live pretty close to the Clinton Greenway.
Okay.
That's kind of near 39th and Division. And so I'll take that both east and west. I do a lot of, commuting downtown. So I can take that all the way down to the water, over the Tillicum, Springwater Corridor. And also these are places I don't just bike, but I like run with my daughter. So we have a daughter, Parker. She's 1 year old. Just had her birthday on Saturday. And so she loves being in the jogging stroller. And so I will use those greenways also as a jogger, and kind of jog around downtown and stuff. I bike to Blazers games. Funny story about taking the cargo bike all the way to the Moda Center, getting all the way there and realizing I forgot the key to the lock.
Oh boy. Yeah.
But it was fast enough. I was able to bike all the way home, huff it, and come back, and it worked out. But so yeah, I do a lot of stuff. Inner Southeast is mostly where I'm putzing around.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about barking at the Moda Center a little bit later. So
I have opinions about that.
We can loop back to that. So sticking on District 3, or let's see, sticking on, what I sense from you is like you're not necessarily like a political animal, somebody who's like, always dream. Well, let's see. I'll rephrase that. I do feel like you've shared that you are sort of called to run, for elected office. It's something you have thought about for a while. Portland is not known as the easiest place to govern. You're young. You have a young daughter. So I'm just really curious. What is there a specific burning policy that you want to get in and fix? I've seen your platform on your website, so I know that you've got all sorts of ideas and thoughts about policies.
Sure.
You're definitely not a one issue candidate, but I just wonder if there was a specific thing sort of burning inside you of like, darn it, that's not as good as it can be. I want to run to make that better.
Yeah, there is. And I think of it in 4 different parts. And I will say I'll answer your question directly, but just to go back to the beginning of it, that, I do feel that my blend of professional experience and education and perspective and approach is uniquely needed in this point in Portland's history. We have a brand new form of government that we're still flexing and testing, and that's going to be years of that. We're entering multiple very painful budget cycles. It's going to result in people losing their jobs. It's going to result in service reductions. And that's not just going to be for this year, that's going to be for the coming years. And my approach to collaborative leadership and really understanding what is empathetic and effective leadership, I do think is uniquely needed in this moment. I'm not the only one who has those qualities in that experience, but I'm one person who does. And it's not just what I've done, it's who I am as a person. And people really expect Portland to get stuff done. And I think that's fair. It's also fair to say our new form of government is going to need time to flex in. Your stress testing stuff. Is this the mayor? Is this council? Is this the CA, like who's on deck for what, and you just need to stress that out. So all of those things compelled me in this moment to throw my hat in the ring. I don't think there's ever a perfect time to decide to do something like this, but after talking with my friends and my family and my wife and just saying, hey, like, is there a place for me here? Is there a lane for me? And the answers kind of kept coming back that, yeah, there could be. And so I decided to do it. To the specific point about the platform, I do think of it, first of all, as collaborative leadership, wanting to work together with people, trusting city staff, trusting our community partners who are doing work, knowing when to step up and say something, and knowing when to step out of the way as a leader is such an important quality. And that's something that I want to bring to anything that I do. And then I want to talk about reimagining what our streets look like. We, especially in the United States, and you know this better than me, we have become accustomed and very used to how our streets look and function, and they don't have to be this way. They can be different. They should be different. And yes, it means doing things in the short term to make small changes, to make things incrementally better. And then it also means having a long-term vision to what you want our streets to be and to look and to function like. So that's very important to me. Everybody deserves housing. And we're in a housing crisis, not just an affordable housing crisis, but overall, where there's not enough housing. It's not affordable enough. We have people who don't have shelter, who don't have running water. That's a humanitarian crisis. And we see it every day. And it's very, very painful. And I can't imagine what it would be like to experience that. Like, I experienced a brief time when I didn't have my own home. I lived under the dining room table of my friend's house, but I still had heat. I still had access to water. So that's not the same thing. And I'm not trying to compare it. So everybody deserves housing. We need to focus on that. And then last, our small business community. Portland has the largest percentage of small businesses that make up its overall business community than any other city of similar size. And I'm not just saying this, but we know if you live in Portland, if you visited here, you know that our small businesses are like a huge part of what make Portland, and they are hurting. And something I do want to bring to this conversation too, and I'll end here. It's important to know that Portland doesn't exist in a vacuum. So Portland exists in a statewide context. We exist in a national context. And so particularly when we think about our small business community, I want to get more creative and more imaginative about what we can do to help them. And especially our very smallest businesses. Like, we have some really great programs that are administered by the city and by Prosper Portland that do a lot to help businesses. And I've talked with business owners who say, that's all great. That stuff is not accessible to me. I don't have time to do it. I'm the only one tending the store. A lot of the stuff that I have to apply seems very complicated, and like I needed to have a legal background to navigate it. And so for all intents and purposes, for those folks, that help is not accessible. So I want to make that stuff more accessible. So those are just a couple of things that I care about in this campaign.
Can we zero in on the business thing a little bit here? Usually when we're talking about helping businesses, well, if you're outside government, you talk about lowering taxes. That's just the number one thing for the most part. Most government people, they would say, well, let's not necessarily lower taxes. Let's find other ways. So I'm just curious, for you personally, do you, it's from a policy position, like how would you strike that balance? Can you detail a little bit more about how you would help keep businesses thriving, these small businesses, which, you know, a lot of people that ride bikes love these small businesses. They are the core of like these little community, neighborhood, commercial districts that we care so much about, that make neighborhoods bikeable and walkable, right? So if those small businesses go biking, goes south as well. So this is a really important thing to keep these businesses going. But I just think too often the only solutions we hear about tend to be, look, just don't mess with us, don't give us any regulations, and lower our taxes. But is there anything else you can add that's not those things that could help support businesses?
Sure. And as you know, a lot of this stuff can be cross-cutting. So when we talk about, I don't know if I mentioned it yet, but we talk about making it easier for building owners to navigate permitting and make improvements to the building. Then we're also talking about, if that is able to happen, then small businesses are more likely to stay, to expand, to grow. So I do want to make it a lot easier for businesses to be able to make modifications to the buildings that they're renting. I mean, and you do have some businesses that are in what are called triple net leases that essentially they don't own the building, but it allows them to make infrastructural changes when they want or need to. And that's kind of folded into part of the rent from the property owner. I will say that I've heard from business owners that we might need some tighter local regulation about those leases, because There are times when building owners say, oh, your rent's going up. Why is that? Oh, because of the triple net lease and you got to make these improvements, or, this thing costs more. And people are like, can you show me the math on that? And they're like, no. So I'd like to explore that. But I think that's something we can do, especially, if Portland wants to be serious about a place where we're not just inviting businesses in and keeping businesses, but allowing those smaller businesses to grow into regional businesses, we need to make sure that they can actually flex and use their spaces in the ways that they want to. So that's one thought that I had.
A lot of those businesses will say sometimes that to use their space the way they want to means they need the parking out in front of their business. How would you talk to a business owner that says, hey, I got nothing against bike riders and better streets, but I really need parking right in front of my business?
Yeah. First, I want to be clear. There's a lot that I need to learn, right? And as I talk to business owners and they're telling me what their stresses are, what I don't want to do is come over the top and be like, no, I know better than you. Because I probably don't. It's also true that when we talk about public policy, yes, we want to make sure that we know what the impacts are on those businesses, but we are trying to set policy citywide, and we have to look out for the entirety of the city when we do that. So when I think about parking and I think about reimagining our streets, it's very important that people who have the highest mobility needs have access to parking. And that's something that I believe very, very deeply. And so something that I would like to see, that as we are changing our streets and figuring out, what should we be using this, 24 foot or 34 foot wide piece of asphalt for, that we're thinking about people who have the highest mobility needs having access to parking. I'd also tell those business owners, and Jonathan, you know better than me, if you increase access to walking and to transit and to biking, their sales go up. And so again, what I don't want to do is have a business owner say, hey, here's my experience, and I want you to be mindful of this. And I don't want to say, yeah, listen, I know better than you. That's not the intent. But the intent is to show them, hopefully through facts and data, and giving good examples, say like, hey, if you rethink how this street may be used, it may be better for your business. And I think that that's really, really important in this.
Why has transportation become such a big priority for you? I noticed on your website, Safer Streets for All People is like the number one thing listed.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you put it number one over anything else, but it is at the top. I noticed those little things. Yeah. But I was at your campaign launch at Back to the Basket. I couldn't help but going since it was at that location.
If you haven't been there, by the way, for people listening, go. They're on 34th and Hawthorne. It's an awesome basketball and culture store and just a super cool spot.
It's very cool. But I noticed in your speech there, you mentioned several transportation points. So I'm just curious, why is transportation such an important part of like how you see the city?
Yeah. I want my daughter to be able to walk to school when she's old enough and not get killed by a car. That was one of the first things I thought of when I thought about running for office, was what world are we leaving her generation? If you're a parent, you understand that feeling. And I'm also not saying that if you're not a parent that you don't care about that or don't understand, of course, because I have always cared about that and understood it. I know that you're a dad. I'm just now feeling that in a different way. So that's one thing. A second thing is that my wife and I navigate Portland almost exclusively not in an automobile. And so I can see when I'm biking down, I can see people when they're walking and they don't feel comfortable crossing the street, or when they have to hustle across. I can see people when they're getting on the bus and that bus stop is not covered. Or people have been waiting a long time. Like I've made trips to like go to the store and come back and someone's been waiting at the bus stop the whole time. That's not acceptable. So I care about it a lot. It's true because it's something that affects me on the daily. Again, not just as a bike rider, but as someone that I think at that slower speed, whether you walk or take the bus or bike, you can see these different ways that people get around, and just knowing and wanting it to be and trusting that it can be better. Another thing I'll say is that my time with the city of New Haven, I helped write a grant application. We were awarded a Reconnecting Communities grant. It was a $2 million planning grant to look at how to reconnect neighborhoods that were split by I-91 in New Haven. And I can't tell you how many parallels there were between New Haven's experience as a model city during urban renewal and Portland's experience having a highway cut through the city, very intentionally bulldozing people's homes and neighborhoods, primarily people of color, lower income people, and that was not an accident. That was done with intention. and that both New Haven and Portland are struggling with and trying to do better to kind of reknit their communities. So I was managing that grant. I was also managing a multi-departmental work group that was in charge of implementing that grant. And so learning about, and I'm kind of spotting some of the books that you have on your shelf here and looking, it's like, do you have that giant Robert Moses book that is just talk about how we basically blew up American cities to allow cars in. And I did a lot of research for that, first for the grant work, and then when I was managing that project. And it really hit home for me that at a time when we did have a lot of federal funding, I mean, that was like a 90-10 federal match to build our interstates. But we had a vision for our cities. I believe it was the absolutely incorrect vision. It was very damaging. But what I would like to see is, an urban regeneration school of thought where we're like, look, like we should be able to reimagine these streets, how they function at a system level, at an individual level. And I'd love to talk a little bit about that. But just to answer your question directly, I care about it because it affects me every day. And I care about it because it's something that I've studied and I've worked on. So yeah, it matters a lot to me.
Yeah, and speaking of the would you say I-90, right?
I-91.
I-91. I've heard you say that you want to just get rid of the Markham Bridge, not get rid of it, or, I mean, what's your plan? Would you want to bury it? I know you're into capping freeways. I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
Tell me about the Markham. What do you see there?
Yeah, I'll start this by saying this is not a new thought. And again, I don't mean to keep saying this, but I know that you know better than me because you've been doing this work for a very long time. But Oregon and Portland has thought about ways to reimagine our interstate system for a long time. And one idea that I am very supportive of exploring more, that has been explored a little bit in the past, and that even Mayor Wheeler in his State of the City address in 2017 said, I'm going to direct BPS to figure out how to get rid of this piece of I-5. So what I'm talking about is I-5 where it splits onto the Markham and then hooks back up at the end of the Fremont. In my view, our long-range vision should be when that bridge reaches the end of its useful life, or even before, let's get rid of it. Let's reroute traffic onto 405. Let's cap that. Let's reclaim acres and acres and acres of prime developable land and reknit those neighborhoods once again. You would regain all of that waterfront access on the east side. Again, you could use that for developable land and park space and green space. And I think it's important to note that if we don't talk about this stuff, if we don't articulate it, it will never happen. And Portland has a super long history of doing amazing things when people have said, you can't do it. You can't get rid of Harbor Drive. Yes, we can. First highway in the country that was removed. You're not going to be able to stop the Mount Hood Expressway. Oh, yes, we can. And you can see, it's funny, if you look closely at different parts of our interstate system, you'll see these little stubs, these off ramps, and you can just imagine what that could have been and the destruction could have caused that we've avoided. So yeah, I'm very supportive of that. I also understand that in order to do something like that, to route all interstate traffic onto 405, you would need generational investment in transit. You would. And so it has to be a both and I do feel very strongly that we need more people who are smarter than me, doing this longer than me, who are advocating. We need that lifted up and talked about more in the public sphere, and to say, yes, like this may not be something we can do today and now, but we should be talking about it and planning for it because it is critically important. Last thing I'll note, we're just thinking about Portland, what it looks like in 2040, 2050. It would be great if the impact of interstates was much, much less, that people could still choose to take a car if they chose, but they could also choose to take transit. They could also choose to bike. They could also choose to walk. And really reclaiming that developable land in our urban core, I just think is such a huge opportunity, and we need to take that more seriously.
I think a lot of people would agree with you that it should be an idea that is talked about more. I think there's also a lot of people that would say, okay, so we've talked about it. Mm-hmm. So let's say, you're elected and you're thinking about this on your bike ride into City Hall one morning, and you think, hey, I'm Councilor Brandon Mullen. I want to actually do something about this. Mm-hmm. What would be a first step you could take to make it go beyond talk in terms of a long range vision to basically bury the Markham, not even bury it.
Get rid of it.
Just get rid of it, route it to 405, or even take maybe more, the more sort of like, I don't know, or even take the idea of burying the max under instead of relying on the old steel bridge, right? Either one of those. It's kind of a similar thing, right? It's like this big idea. People get excited. It's good for a couple social media posts, but it doesn't go anywhere else. So as an organizational leadership
hey, I
pro,
felt that one.
Hey, well, I mean, what do you think would be like, okay, number one step would be blank.
Yeah. And I don't mean to just say we're going to talk about it. And by the way, I do want to zoom into more short-term solutions too.
Yeah, for sure.
The long-term, I love this stuff. One thing is we need to work with our Office of Government Relations and get it on the agenda. So, and I know there's a limited amount of time to do that, but City of Portland has really smart, dedicated people doing tribal, state, and federal government relations. Council works with government relations to set the agenda. It's changed a little bit since the new form of government, and that the influence that bureaus have has changed a little bit. Get it on the agenda. People are not going to take you seriously unless you say, yes, like we're willing to invest our time, our limited amount of time, talking about long range planning. So that'd be the first thing that I would do. Second, and going back to the Wheeler administration, I don't know how far he got with this. Maybe you know more than me, but directing our bureaus to look at some preliminary planning so that when the time comes that we have the federal funding to do it, that we're ready and we're not scrambling. And so that's another thing that we can do that we have control over. And the last thing I would say is that it is true that the more we get these ideas out there and we kind of break the first wave of that's ridiculous, or you're pie in the sky, or that's the risk. I could see someone watching this video being like, this guy just wants to do all this stuff that he can't afford and he doesn't know what he's talking about. If we are not discussing it, if we're not planning for it, if we're not getting it on our lobbying agenda, again, it will not happen. And also say this, Portland has to take care of itself. So the interstates, they're meant to carry traffic from different places inside and outside of Portland, but they have an enormous impact on our urban core. We need to advocate for ourselves and say, yes, we want people to be able to get to and from, and at times through Portland, but that shouldn't destroy our city, and it shouldn't impede the ability for people to get from one place to the other. It shouldn't impede our ability to develop our urban core. So I think all of that's very important.
And very related to that, but on a more specific actual project level, is of course the I-5 Rose Quarter project.
Yes.
So I'm assuming if you're saying that I-5 should be routed over to I-405, that, well, I won't assume anything. Let's say, because this could very well happen, there could be a vote at City Council, some sort of procedural thing, or even an up or down vote at some point that would help fund or push forward that project, which in its current form would widen I-5 between I-84 and the Fremont Bridge. Would you vote against a project that would say we have to widen the freeway if we also want to do the redevelopment that Albina Vision Trust envisions? Or how do you see that project, specifically the balance of let's do the redevelopment and cap the freeway versus ODOT saying we absolutely have to widen the freeway as well?
That's a great question. How I'd answer that is that this is a great time to reevaluate the scope of that project. So we've seen that project has been delayed. There's funding that is or is not available. And that's what I've said. I don't support freeway expansion. There has been no evidence that I've seen that expanding your freeways alleviates traffic. The only evidence I've seen, and there is some disagreement about the extent, the only evidence I've seen is that when you widen your freeways, you induce more demand and they get choked up again. And so in my view, this is an awesome time to reevaluate the scope of this project. And I completely understand that ODOT as a state agency, they may have different goals and priorities than the city of Portland. I completely respect that. I understand that there are partners. I've worked with a lot of people in ODOT and I respect the work that they do. But I also think it's important for us to advocate for ourselves. And anytime you have, and I hope this is a direct enough answer, anytime that you have a change in your budget or the financial landscape, we should be saying, hey, that is an opportunity to reevaluate. And that's what I would advocate for here, because I desperately want Lower Albina to be knit back together. That is extremely, extremely important. I have a lot of respect for the Albina Vision Trust and the work that they're doing and the buildings that they own and how they have hey, a bold vision for how this could look different. And that's amazing. I also appreciate that the Blazers are partnering with them and the Albino Rose Alliance. I'd love to talk about kind of the Moda Center stuff and how that might fit in. But all to say, my answer would be, this is a great time to reevaluate the scope. What does Portland need? What do we want? What makes sense for us today and 20, 30 years from now? That's what we should be advocating for. And last, my hope is that our future in Portland and across the United States is not one where we have an ever expanding need for automobile capacity. We can do better. That's what I would advocate for.
I appreciate that. Thanks. There's a big conversation happening right now at the city around transportation funding and finding a new way to pay for all the things that need to be done.
Yeah.
Councilor Olivia Clark, who really spearheaded it, her main thing that she keeps talking about is fixing potholes. That's kind of common for electeds to mention potholes. I think it's the most politically viable way to talk about new revenue, new fees and taxes around transportation. So that's probably why she's doing it. Or she could just be actually really frustrated by all the potholes that we have. I'm just curious. I'm sure you're following that. I'll let folks know, or maybe recap if you haven't been following it closely. There's 2 fees that are being debated right now. It's actually coming up April 15th. It's going to be back in front of a committee right before it goes to the full council. One of them is a transportation utility fee, where the city would charge every Portland resident either $12 for single family or $8.50 for multifamily dwellings. And then there'd be a commercial aspect to that too. So if you're a business owner, you'd be charged some percentage of your utility bill. The city thinks that would raise about, they say the average price for commercial properties would be about $61 per month. The other one is called a street damage restoration fee. That one I'm actually almost positive is going to pass without any debates. That would just simply charge the utilities and other companies that dig up the streets for projects to actually pay PBOT to actually fix them and make them whole, which is pretty wild that we haven't been doing that already. So, so because that one's not going to be as much of a debate, let's talk more about the transportation utility fee, which everybody calls the TUF. I am curious if you support that concept, and in its current form, are there tweaks that you would want to make? There are a few amendments being proposed. I know Councilor Green has something in there. There's some debate about how the money that it raises, which the city says is, I think, $48 million a year if it comes out, $46 million a year that they could raise from it. Do you support the TUF in its current form? Are there any tweaks you'd like to see with it going forward?
Would support with amendments. And so the current version of the TUF, the transportation utility fee, is a little bit regressive. And also, I'm not compelled by the fact that if you own a laundromat, that suddenly you have this enormous bill. But if you're an Amazon warehouse that have trucks going in and out, that somehow you're not paying proportionally more. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So yeah, like amendments like Councilor Green's amendment, that's something that I'm interested in. I think that it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's doing the like parcel size or lot size.
I should be clear. It's not a formal amendment. He's simply adding this as like a discussion I don't know point? What you call it. It's a discussion point. He's saying like he wants this to be on the table for discussion when it's debated, because the real fear at council, and I think this is a majority opinion on council, but overwhelmingly, is that we just need to get something done. And I haven't seen anybody that's willing to say, willing to do anything that would risk it not happening. But that's also causing a little bit of heartburn from critics and advocates who see that as, well, you're really rushing into a pretty substantial new fee. And in the case of the commercial one, there's even more heartburn because of like what you said. Some businesses, if you're basing it on the utility bill, let's say a brewer, for instance, who's using a lot of water, they're going to be charged a rather high amount. But so some amendments you're saying, you'd like that idea of maybe looking at parcel size for the commercial one instead of, some people even have suggested even expand that per square foot thing even to the residential one.
And so, I mean, let's think about this like as you're thinking about policy, how to implement. One important aspect of this is if we pass this, are we able to actually administer it? How expensive is that? So I want to give a shout out to PBOT, did a series of open houses around these fees. I attended the one in my district. It was awesome. They had poster boards you kind of walked through to say, hey, here's the problem. We have all this deferred maintenance. Here's why we need to start raising more money. Here's what other communities do. What would you support, not support? And also the staff who were there, it was really well staffed and they were answering really difficult questions from people. So I just want to give a shout out. That was one of the best open houses I've attended. But all of this is like a devil in the details thing. So one idea that I had that became very clear was probably not going to be able to get implemented was, why don't we do this by vehicle weight? If we're saying that, hey, like the more that you drive, which was the theory behind the gas tax, which is the more you drive, the more you pay. People have electric cars, so that balance has been struck differently now. But why not do it by vehicle weight? Because you're doing more damage to the streets. The answer that I got back, which I found pretty compelling, was how would we implement that? How would we administer it? Where are you going to go to weigh it? That'd be a lot of work. And so to your point, I do think the reason why council wants to take a step on this is because it's relatively easy to implement, to say, hey, we're going to put a fee into your utility bill, done and dusted. I would like to see more refinement before it's passed now. The argument that is being made, as far as I'm following it, and I think you already said it, was that, hey, we can tweak it later. I do think that could happen, and I believe people in good faith when they say that's our intent, is to say, hey, let's get something on the books now and we'll make refinements later. Jonathan, there are a lot of priorities in the city. And when you're talking about a specific issue and you're setting it up for the first time, I would rather take a moment and say, hey, are we doing it the right way? And this goes kind of to my theory of how do you make effective change in government. Sometimes it is better to take slightly more time in the beginning and get that right, or closer to right, than it is to go back and edit something heavily later. The argument the other way is like, hey, we need to move quickly. Like you're saying, Brandon, that you want government to move more quickly and faster. And again, I do think in this specific case, we could do a little bit better to figure out, okay, how can we make this tax slightly less regressive and more reflective of how people actually use vehicles, and tie it to that.
Yeah, and to be clear, Councillor Green did pass an amendment, and I thought it was a pretty smart one, where he said he wants to make sure that they maintain the ability to change the fee design. That's right. Not just the rate of the fee.
That's right.
So that, I think, was
for
key,
that exact reason,
because it gets to what you're saying. I think he has a little bit of foresight about being able to actually, change how the fee is administered, or the details of the fee, not just the rate up or down. So
I think if it were to take, one more week, one more meeting, one more, hey, can we have staff stress test this? And we could get to something that's slightly more refined, and we have the ability to change it later. That's probably the route I would advocate for in this specific case.
I mean, and this will get to the heart of governing in Portland, because right now the concern is not only the severity of the crisis in terms of actually doing something that gives PBOT a solid revenue stream, which they desperately need, but the other reason this is so urgent, if you just politically speaking, is that the city budget is just around the corner. Yep. And they are really afraid that any delay means that this thing is going to just not get handled, or blow up once the knives come out during the budget process. So, and I know you've said some things just in terms of leadership style about how council takes too much time to do things, sort of processing things, that they could have done better, so maybe collaborating beforehand. Of course, there's some concern about how they collaborate in public meeting laws, but I just wonder, can you say anything about you personally and your style that would make it so that in this real case of trying to figure out this tough fee situation, what would Councillor Mullen be doing behind the scenes to make sure, like, hey, y'all, the rest of the council, let's try to get together, get our ducks on the row so we can get this thing passed. Like, is there something you could say about how you would approach that?
Yeah, a couple things. And first to say, again, I have a lot of respect for our current city council. Anyone who chooses to run for public office, it's a tough job. And there is a lot, to your point, that we don't see behind the scenes. And so I'm not trying to take anything away from folks when I say this, but I think that coordinating before meetings in ways that are in alignment with our public meetings laws is really, really important. It's important that when you as a counselor, you direct your staff to speak with other staff, to give them your trust and to fully delegate those conversations. I mean, as someone who worked in City Hall and worked with elected officials, there were varying degrees to which those elected officials would truly trust their staff and the staff of other counselors to move the ball forward on stuff. There are some folks who felt very strongly that they needed to be in every room and every conversation. That is not me. I have a high degree of trust in my team. I've been a manager multiple times, And that's something that just philosophically and in practice will be a feature of my office if elected, is that high degree of trust and coordination beforehand. Second, making sure that you are never surprising your colleagues at the dais. Without getting into specifics, there have been times that if you've just been watching city council meetings or committee meetings, it becomes clear that there are concepts that are being discussed at the dais or amendments that are being introduced to the dais that were not part of the conversation before that meeting. Now, sometimes that happens in total good faith. You've heard some compelling testimony, right? That's the hope, is that people who testify would sometimes change your mind and you need to pivot. But I think making a bright focus on like, hey, we're going to do what we can ahead of the meeting and make sure that once we walk into the room that we're on the same page. The second thing I wanted to note, and this is like an early concept and still draft thinking, so here I am saying it publicly, but how about a shot clock? Like, let's get a shot clock on the dais and just, and again, this is another concept. This is not something that's new to local government around the country. There are multiple cities who do just the same way that we limit the amount of public testimony that you may have. 3 minutes, we're running out of time. Now you get 2 minutes. Oh, we're really punched for time. We're going to go down to a minute. We need to have a shot clock for our counselors as well, because I don't think that anyone thought that when we moved from 5 to 12, that those 12 would be comfortable speaking proportionately less. Like, all those people are very smart. They know what they're doing. They're super passionate. And I say this as someone that maybe in the course of this interview that you're seeing, like, Brandon, you're talking a lot too, like, maybe I need a shot clock here, right? Like, so I would be very interested in that, because there's just not enough time. There have been too many meetings where it's like, hey, we're going over. Hey, can staff stay an extra hour? Hey, we're going to have to carry this item to next time. And that is not acceptable if you see it as a system-wide failure, which at this point I do. This is not once or twice. This is almost every single meeting, and there is a lot to do. So that would be a second thing that would be more conceptual. I'd be very open to that.
You sort of stole the thunder of one of my basketball questions, which was what elements of the game of basketball transfer to politics? Shot clock.
Shot clock.
Okay, so
wouldn't that be sick though, to have like the TISO clock behind the counselors?
Then you could even have buzzer beaters. Like,
that'd be sick.
If you could get in right under the shot clock with like a really great idea, or just like stop your speech, and it would just be like a mic drop.
I'm in for that.
So so there was something where there was a lot of quick action from local electeds, and it had to do with the Moda Center funding. Were you at all, so I guess I could say, were you at all surprised about how quickly local electeds lined up almost to the person? I think there's maybe one or two has been vocally against it, in support of the Moda Center renovation and the Trailblazers. So just so, as you know, just so folks know, there's been a big conversation about putting almost $1 billion, 600 from the city and county, and then another 3 something from the state to do needed renovations to the Moda Center, which is where the Trailblazers play. And the Trailblazers also recently got bought by a new ownership group. And so there was some thinking that, it needs to get renovated in order to be sort of like competitive with other markets in the NBA. So there was relatively quickly everybody lining up saying, sure, absolutely, 100%. Even in contrast with all the dire warnings about our budgets and lack of money, which I think was shocking to a lot of Portlanders. So I wonder how you see that as someone with some political experience, or at least working around electeds, and also organizational project management, and a big Blazer fan and a big sports fan. I really was looking closely at your responses to that. So I wanted you to share that with folks. How do you feel about the Moda Center situation, and were you surprised at how quickly support coalesced for it?
I wasn't surprised at how quickly that support coalesced, because it would be devastating to lose the Trailblazers. And I will say, Jonathan, that this pits 2 parts of myself and 2 parts of my identity against each other, the Blazers fan and the public servant. The public servant is going to win out on this one pretty strongly. Here's my view. The Blazers and their new ownership very quickly began lobbying the governor, the mayor, the legislature ahead of this short session to say, we need money and we need it right now. And to your point, $600 million is not chump change. And I understand that part of this was, hey, the sale wasn't complete yet. We also have gotten reporting that Tom Dundon, who is leading that ownership group, who now owns the Portland Trailblazers, that he was in conversations with Governor Kotek, with Mayor Wilson, that And so during Oregon's constitutionally limited short session, by the way, every even numbered year, you can only go for about a month. He said, I need to see some financing and I need to see it now. So that did pass. That's a tax deferral. They're going to take tax money that was generated due to economic activity in and outside near the Moda Center, put it into an arena fund. And then to your point, yes, the Multnomah County and City of Portland has to put in some money too. So to answer your question, I wasn't surprised to see the support come straight away. What we have seen since then is some very appropriate pushback from some counselors to say, hey, if we are going to invest public money into what is technically a public asset because the city bought it for $1, but we could talk about, hey, they actually purchased a $600 million liability, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole right at this moment. That if we're going to make that investment, we need to prove that it's a good investment, that we're being good stewards of our public money. And to that point, I absolutely agree. I will say that I don't know, did you have a chance to see the Dundon interview or the introductory press conference that he did a couple days ago when he was introduced?
Tom Dundon, who's like the lead owner, basically,
right, yep.
Billionaire who made a lot of his money in the subprime auto loan thing, which really grinds on me. But
me too.
There's that.
Did you see that?
I didn't actually watch it. No, sorry.
I will say this. I was encouraged by what Tom Dundon said. He was asked a question about like, hey, that $600 million, is that a firm number? Like if you don't get $600 million exactly, are you going to be willing to move the team? Because a lot of the tenor of this press conference was, hey, we're here. I haven't even thought about moving the team. We're really focused on local funding here. His answer was, and somebody can fact check me if I mischaracterize it, but some version of, there's no negotiation I've been a part of that you pick a number and that number just holds the whole time, that there's always room to flex and negotiate. So here's what I'm saying. Tom Dundon, I take you at your word when you say that. And I would like for you to negotiate in good faith with the city of Portland on this. And look, there's like a lot of, like my little camera thing, but there's a lot of ways that we can do this. You could have the Portland Trailblazers put in an amount of money. That's a clean way to do it. Just invest some money into the arena. You could have a revenue sharing model where the revenue generated by the Portland Trailblazers is because of the public investment from the city, is some of that is shared back with the city. That's the second way you could do it. A third way you could do it, you mentioned Albina Vision Trust and the Albina Rose Alliance, which the Albina Rose Alliance is like the Blazers working with Albina Vision Trust. Strengthen that partnership. Like, what more can we do to knit back together these neighborhoods that were destroyed by the construction of Memorial Coliseum and by I-5? Strengthen that partnership, make a specific financial commitment to say, like, yes, like, here's what we can commit to help make this a more active, livable neighborhood. And by the way, if that neighborhood were more active or more livable, that had, more mixed use stuff, more people living there, that would be good for the Blazers too. So those are some of the ways, and I'm sure there are people who know more about this stuff than me that have other ideas too, but all to say, I think that the pushback we have seen since then from counselors is totally healthy, totally appropriate. I take everybody at good faith that they want to negotiate in good faith, and I'm excited to see what happens with that.
And are you relatively confident that those negotiations, let's say, especially if they included some conversation about using money from the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which folks don't know is a city program that's based on a 1% tax on basically a few massive companies.
Like revenues over
500 million or something. Yeah. They basically did that to carve out just a few, like Amazon and a couple. Yeah. But anyways, generated a lot of money, much more than people expected. So it's basically comes up in every funding conversation right now in the city, including this one. But of course, that is a concern for some people because they like, a sports team for a fund that was specifically created to fund, frontline communities that are doing work in the climate change oriented place and who are most affected by climate change. So, would you support using PCEF dollars as part of this package? And if so, like, would you want conditions on it or something like that?
Yeah. PCEF cannot become a slush fund. So that's number one. Number two, and to your point, when we talk about climate justice, we're talking about the people who have the least, they've contributed the least to climate change and are impacted the very most. So here's what I'll say to that. If the Portland Trailblazers and the city of Portland can articulate specifically how this project, how you would get massive energy savings, how you would get renewable energy generation, and how you'd be helping communities who've been most impacted by climate change. If you can articulate that specifically, show the numbers, show the data, that could be something that I would support. I don't think that is an outrageous opinion to have. I don't think the team or the city has done the math on that. I don't think that they've shown, here's a spreadsheet showing that if you gave us this amount of money, here are the benefits that would come from that. To the best of my knowledge, the most information we have about what the renovation will be at the Moda Center is a website that was put together by the team that shows some generated images that may or may not be final and are, more or less compelling based on who you ask. So all to say, if they can show the math and they can show that specific benefit to people impacted by climate change, if they can show the specific energy savings, they can show specifically how they're generating and renewing more energy, that could be something I would support, but that work has not yet been done.
So possibly something like a much better facility for parking bikes that was built by a company that is run by Black, Indigenous, and people of color.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. So, I mean, all I got to say is if we come through this whole Moda thing without a really amazing bike parking and making it super safe to get there, I'll be pissed.
How often do you ride your bike to Blazers games?
Every time I go.
Same. And so we park our bikes on the south side, kind of near where the fountain is and the Rip City sign.
Yeah.
What they have done, and I love that they have put out a cargo container thing that kind of turns into a stage during good weather. And they put it right in front of the bike rack, which is now obscured. It's dark. You can't see it. You can't see what's going on back there. It's a security risk. It's a safety risk. It's like right next to the grass. You're trying to, especially if you bring a cargo bike. There was a colleague of mine at Metro. It was like, who has this really ripping cargo bike, and she was kind of trying to pull it out, and she's like going on the grass, and it's muddy, and she's slipping. That is unacceptable. That bike parking it's not safe. It's not secure. You can't see it. And it's not visible. So I totally agree with you. I mean, it is such a major missed infrastructure need to not have better bike parking at the Moda Center. And here's what I'll say. I know for a fact there are people who would prefer to bike to the Moda Center and they choose not to because they're not really sure where to put their bike. They've seen it and it doesn't look great. Like if you had safe, well-lit, easy to navigate bike parking, more people would go there by bike guaranteed.
And have maybe one of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Moda Center security staff that stand around every door, every place in the arena. Maybe have one of them stand at a little kiosk by the bike parking to keep it a little more secure. Because that's another reason why people won't bike there, is they're worried their bike will get stolen while they're inside at the game. So, okay, sticking on basketball, we already talked a little bit about what elements of the game of basketball transfer to politics. You want a shot clock in city council, which I think is fun.
Still draft thinking, so I reserve my right to change my opinion on that, but I like it so far.
Yeah. And I bet you would say something about the need for collaboration on a team, since that is a major part of sort of like how you see leadership. Any other things that off the top of your head where the game of basketball, like even from like a coaching and leadership thing, which, so let's say, your team is city council instead of a basketball team. What else transfers to politics, do you think?
Yeah, I think the coach analogy is a good one. What does it mean to empower your team? What does it mean to be a leader where other staff see you as someone that they're comfortable coming to and talking to? That matters a lot to me. And it's not just in the work that I've done managing teams and not just in the trainings that I've developed on effective and empathetic leadership. It's also been in my education of leadership. And it's so interesting how it's not just because it's the nice thing to do, and it's not just best practice. The neuroscience suggests that the best way to lead is to lead through collaboration, through delegation, through making what people are doing, making their tasks very clear, having very articulable and measurable ways of knowing whether they're doing their job well or not. All of those things contribute to people's psychological safety, which, again, this isn't just like we're doing it because we want people to be happy, which we absolutely do want that. It's because it's more efficient. And when you're talking about, how I see basketball and politics kind of mixing, or maybe a more coach-like approach to leadership, I do think that's important. I mentioned making sure that people have the authority to do stuff on behalf of our office without my being there, and how important that is. And then how important it is, again, to demonstrate that our office is open, that I am open. Something I experienced as a city staffer, some elected officials were very approachable and super cool and super easy to talk to. And they would say, hey, like if there's something that's bothering you or something about the way my office is approaching things, like come chat with me. And there were some elected officials where that was absolutely not the case. And they were unapproachable. I'm not even sure they always meant to, but sometimes it was very intimidating to be in their presence for them. And that kind of translated to their staff. And so I have a very strong belief that in the small part of the world that I can influence, whether it's as an elected official or doing other work, that our office, that our team, that our colleagues can be an example of how you work together collaboratively, how you do it with respect. And then importantly, Jonathan, people need to be able to disagree directly with each other and not hide that. I am so sick and tired of Portland polite. And this is coming from someone who's lived in Oregon basically his whole life. People need to be willing to say the difficult thing with each other and to know that it's coming from a place of, hey, I really feel this way, or I think this is very important to say, and to not hide that behind a smile. I do think that's very important. There's a difference between being nice and being kind. I want to be known as being effective and kind, not necessarily nice. I think it's very important that people are willing to disagree with each other, and so that would be a feature of our office as well.
I appreciate that. Bottom line, if you're elected, what would you do to get more basketball courts in District 3?
I love the public-private partnership that the Blazers and Nike had for a time. I think the very last of those courts were installed pretty recently in the last couple years, and I'm forgetting the name of the park.
Well, I think Farragut Park just got a new surface, but those are redoing existing courts. What the big problem we have is just access to, of course, gyms being the best covered, but just in general, more basketball courts. I mean, take it as any challenge for some kind of public service. I mean, we haven't even talked about one of my big issues, which is public restrooms. So, it's kind of in a similar vein. It's just like if you're on city council, how would you, and you were really just convinced that we needed more basketball courts. Yeah. How are you going to do to get those installed?
Well, I mean, you have to budget for them, right? And I know that Parks has a backlog of maintenance. What I would argue specifically about basketball courts and other surfaces like that, they do require some maintenance, but a lot of it is like, hey, the surface is flat. There is, whether it's composite or concrete, and you're putting the hoops up. And then the maintenance for a while is kind of like, are the nets shredded or not? I mean, I'm old enough to have played on metal nets. They're not really popular anymore, but like I've gotten my finger stuck in a metal net once or twice. But like that part of my argument is like these spaces are so important for people to be able to get out and play, compete, or sometimes even to shoot hoops by themselves and meditate, that you have to budget for it. It's a budget priority question. And I would say this too, like just more broadly, that when you make budgeting decisions, you are making, budget, it's a moral document. You're making decisions about what you think is most and less important. I believe that being outside, being active, and especially in Oregon, we do need more covered spaces specifically to protect from the rain. That is really, really critical to a healthy life, to a fulfilling life. I mean, we talk about affordability. It's not just what does stuff cost. It's do I have access to things to enrich my life? And basketball courts, it's not to the exclusion. That's not the only thing, but that is one thing I do care a lot about. So you just have to budget for it.
Great. Hey, Portland, I'm not giving up on that. I know we have this history. We had a network of skate parks. There's been a couple pump tracks made, bicycle, skills tracks. So covered basketball courts is the next thing I'm going to be talking about a lot. So, okay, maybe the last question, not sure, we'll see. So in basketball coaching, when I'm looking at a player and I'm talking about development, I'm thinking of two things is a lot of the way that I'll frame it. I'm looking at what are the rate limiters, right? It's kind of like a term that we'll use in sort of like basketball coaching parlance, which is basically an athlete's rate limiter. What are the things that they're doing, the tendencies, the behaviors that limit their ability to stay on the floor, right? So things that a coach says, look, you're a good kid, but you can't do X, Y, Z. So you're going to have to sit on the bench until you get better at that. Then the other piece of it is their superpowers. You got to be able to identify what can this athlete do really, really, really well, right? And then you build those and you fix the rate limiter. So I'm wondering if you could share with me an example of each of those for you. So
Yeah.
is there a rate limiter that you see for yourself, something where you're working on something that you'd like to get better at in the desired role that you're looking for? And then after that, maybe share one of your Brandon Mullen superpowers.
Sure. Well, Jonathan, as you know, I have no flaws at all. So
check that
just
one off.
kidding. Got to get that in real quick so they don't clip it out. Please don't aggregate me. Also, I love like listening to Brian Windhorst in the Hoop Collective podcast. He's often like, don't aggregate me on this.
Nice.
One of my rate limiters and something I've been actively working on as an adult, particularly the last, 8-10 years. Sometimes my desire for people to like me gets in the way of me being an effective leader. So that's something that through my studies and through my work, I have done a lot of work on. And I've gotten a lot more confident in understanding like, hey, you don't need to be my friend for us to work together, right? We don't need to like each other to work well together. And it kind of goes back to that being direct part that like me telling you, hey, that rubbed me the wrong way, that struck me the wrong way, or here's what I'm thinking. I disagree. This thing you're passionate about, I disagree with it. Here's why. That gets to better work. And in my view, it gets to more respectful relationships. Again, you're not there to make friends. That isn't the point of being a public servant. It's to be able to work with the most number of people, and yes, to see people's humanity, and yes, to approach it with empathy. But so that's something that I have done a lot of work on. And really, I would say I'm proud of myself on how I have changed as a person and as a professional in that respect. And now I very much value being an effective leader and what that means. And then some of my superpowers, like I'm a very strong project manager. And that's something that in the last 15 years as a professional, people have come to me to say, hey, and most recently in the city of New Haven from different departments, like, hey, how are you organizing this? How are you tracking this? You seem to always be able to like, you ping me on this thing and you said I didn't do it, or you're able to connect this dot with that dot over here. And so, I value being able to take really complex stuff, being able to explain it in ways that are easy to digest, and then being able to see it for its parts. And that was a lot of my process improvement work too, which was to take a whole kind of gnarly complex and disambiguate it, and then figure out where you can make improvements or where you can cut something out. So my project management is a superpower of mine. And then a second one I would say is my sincere drive for study of and my demonstration of collaboration with other people. And I've been, parts of my work at times have been brought in to help understand, figure out, smooth over where there've been tense relationships between different people and departments. And that's something that the city of Portland is still, you've heard for as long as you've lived here about the silos between bureaus, and that this new form of government was supposed to break down the silos. And that work is absolutely ongoing. When we talk about silos, we're also talking about passionate people who care really deeply about their work, and they don't want to see their work being blown this way or that by other folks who they feel don't understand it. So there's a real human part to being able to get into tricky, intense situations and make them work better, work faster, work smoother. But that's something that I would say is a strength of mine as well.
Very cool. I appreciate you sharing that. Boy, that's almost pretty much all I've got. I was going to ask you if you had any theories about how to make more people ride bikes in Portland, as maybe a bonus question. Any idea for what can we do to really light a fire under folks and get them biking more?
I have a couple answers. One is I might look to you for that answer. I think as someone who's worked in this space a long time, I bet you'd have better ideas than me.
I'm not running for office. So,
that's very true.
You know.
It has to be safer to ride bikes. That's like in Portland, having lived in different places, I very much appreciate the network that we have. It is better than a lot of cities. In New Haven, Cassie did not feel comfortable cycling. For me, I'm a pretty strong biker, and it was scary.
Okay, everybody's gonna agree it has to be safer, but I'll drill down a little bit more. Like how?
Okay,
what do we do?
Here's one idea.
Go ahead.
Our greenway system.
Okay,
we have, and I noticed there was you have a sign somewhere about diverters. We love diverters, and diverters are public safety. How many times have I been on that greenway and seen a car just race down it? And we do have some diverters. We need more. And look, I know that people deserve local access to their homes that are on what are supposed to be low volume, low speed streets. But that's one specific solution that I would bring. It's a relatively low cost infrastructure change you can make. And one more plug to say, maybe a little bit more tactical urbanism mixed into here. I mean, I was researching, and the city of Nashville gives $20,000 to community members to articulate, and then they fund their own tactical urbanism projects. It could be changes in streetscapes and whatever. Let's do that here in Portland. We can do that too. So those are some answers I'd have.
Cool. I like those. Those are good answers.
Great.
That's it. Anything else you want to talk about? Any closing message before the shot clock runs out on us here, Brandon?
Just to say thank you, and I appreciate you having me on, and I'm really, really excited about this race, and I'm excited about Portland. Portland's home. I love it here, and I'm really, I'm looking forward to using, to being a public servant in a different way, and I just appreciate anyone who is willing to give me a look. Thank you to you all too.
And you got to say your website or your Instagram or whatever, so folks know.
Sure. Yeah. If you search Brandon Mullen on Instagram or TikTok or Blue Sky, you'll find me there. And then you can find our website is at mullen4pdx.com. That's Mullen, the number 4pdx.com. I have my platform there. It's pretty lengthy. We're making some edits to it, but philosophically it will be the same. And yeah, check us out there.
Great. And that's Mullen, Mullen.
The number 4.
Not to be confused with the famous Chris Mullen from the Warriors, Hall of Fame basketball player.
That's right, whose hairstyle I famously emulated as a 9-year-old. Oh, yeah.
All right, I'm going to find that photo.
I had a flat top. I'll send it to you.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming in, Brandon.
Thanks, Jonathan.